Hello and welcome back to Russ's Movie Corner. My name is Russ, and as you can see, I am sitting in front of my movie corner. Have my Armor of God t-shirt on, my Son of God movie right next to me, and judging by the frame around me, we are back, taking down another atheist. And again, today on the chopping block is ScamManDan and his video, Creationist Has Proof of Noah's Flood. In the last episode, right when we ended... ScamManDan was trying to sit there and say, hey, where's your master's degree, Matt Powell? How do you know that these rocks are the way they are? And I said, well, it's pretty simple, ScamManDan. Notice the folds around me, okay? You can't bend rock, okay? You might be able to deform rock slightly, but you're never going to be able to bend it. Not like you see it on the screen right here, okay? And so the problem comes in when people like ScamManDan don't really understand geology, the processes of geology, how things form, nothing like that, okay? ScamManDan is one of these people who likes to think he knows what science, ! Trademarked, actually is. Okay? He doesn't, but he likes to think that he does. And because of this, he likes to throw around, some different things. And I'll say this. There are a few things that he has said and done over the years on his channel where, especially when it comes to Flat Earth, where he has talked about legitimate things. But that doesn't mean that he knows exactly what he's talking about or exactly what's going on with science or with anything. So, honestly, if you're going to listen to someone like ScamManDan, you're gonna have to try to understand what processes are which, okay? And how things happen. Because you cannot fold rock, hard rock, like this, okay? Now, you can fold it when it's soft, and then when it hardens into rock, then it hardens into rock. And again, we know this doesn't take millions of years to happen, okay? Because we've seen that happen in floodplains and stuff like that. Flood deposits a whole bunch of sediment, and then the layers down below harden up and become a new layer of sedimentary rock. Okay? It doesn't take millions of years. So let's jump back into this, and let's see where Matt Powell's going. Because we just got done with Dan, so I'm sure this is going to bounce back to Matt Powell.
And that's why they're all perfectly bent many times. And you can see these beautiful photos of mountain ranges that show that they were created by a catastrophic flood and not millions of years of geological time. And that's why you find polystratofossils connecting all the layers. That's why you find whales on mountains, clams on mountains, sea life on every single mountain on Earth. Why? Because the Earth was flooded. Because by the word of God, the heavens were of old, and the earth standing out of the water and in the water. Because the world that then was, that was overflowed with water, perished.
Okay, great. So, the Bible states that all high areas were covered, but...
Yes. In fact, I'll prove it to you, Dan. Because, obviously, you've never actually read this passage before. Okay? Genesis chapter 7, starting in verse 17. For 40 days the flood kept coming on the earth, and the waters increased, and they lifted the ark high above the earth. The waters rose and increased greatly on the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. They rose greatly on the earth, and all the high mountains were under the entire heavens were covered. The waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 20 feet. That's like 15 cubits. Okay? Or about 6.9 meters. Every living thing that moved on the earth perished, birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarmed over the earth and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out, men and animals and all the creatures that moved along the ground, and the birds of the air were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those who were with him on the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days. Now, we're going to jump over here to Second Peter, because this is important for people who want to support Dan and want to look at this geologic time and go, oh, well, yeah, what does your Bible say about that? It says this: first of all, you must understand that in the last days scoffers will come, scoffing and following their own evil desires. They will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. But they deliberately forget that long ago, by God's word, the heavens existed and the earth was formed out of water and by water. By these waters also was the world of that time was deluged and destroyed. By the same word, the present heavens and earth are reserved for fire, being kept for the day of judgment and destruction of ungodly men. Now, I can already tell you that what's going to happen is when I press play, Dan is going to say, well, but what about Mount Everest, and what about the Andes, and what about all these mountain ranges that we see today? Okay? And we'll get to that in 1 second. But I can already predict exactly what he's going to say.
Everything that happened in the Bible happened in this little circle.
No, it didn't. No, it didn't. Okay? Because, like, Paul went all the way to Greece and back through Turkey, okay? And then on to Rome. So, no, Dan, what you're trying to say is that in the Old Testament, okay, everything that happened in the Old Testament happened in that little circle. With the exception of the ark, because it landed on the mountains of Ararat, which are actually just a little bit above this circle right about here, okay, where my cursor is. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that the flood wasn't a global flood. Because I can predict he's probably going to say, well, then, Noah just probably experienced some local floods in the area. Really? Then why would God have him build a gigantic boat to save a bunch of animals? Huh? Why wouldn't he just say, hey, you know what, Noah? Pack up all your family, pack up all your possessions, take some of these animals out of here, and go move north, or move south, or move out to the east, or move out to the west. Why wouldn't he tell them just move? Why would he have them build a big, gigantic boat? Come on, man. Seriously. Think about it for a minute. If this wasn't going to be a global flood, why would he have told Noah, build a big boat? Why wouldn't he have just said, go move to another place? Go move 10 valleys over and you'll be safe. I mean, that is the most idiotic logic I have ever heard in my life. And I've heard many, many, many atheists, including ScamManDan himself, make this argument multiple times. Okay? It is absolutely idiotic.
Right here. How do we know that the Andes were covered?
Because the Andes weren't there, you moron. Didn't I just predict he was going to say that? Didn't I just predict he was going to say that? Yes. Yes, I did. In fact, go back about 5 minutes. I'm dead serious. Actually, probably less than that. Probably about 4 minutes. Okay? In my video, right before this section, okay, where I said, I'm going to predict exactly what he's going to say. I predicted that he was going to say, well, what about the Andes? What about Everest and the Himalayas? What about these mountain ranges? What about those mountain ranges? They weren't there! The earth was much different back before the flood than it was after the flood. Because people like Dan here, they think uniformitarianism. And that is just a gigantic word that's basically saying the same thing that it says in 2 Peter. Okay? The present is the key to the past. That whatever's happening now must have been happening for billions of years. And this is the point that Matt Powell was making, because Kent Hovind has made it numerous times on every single one of his creation science evangelism videos. The mountains would have eroded flat in 14 million years. So if these continents are truly millions or billions of years old, there would be no mountains, because those mountains would have eroded flat by now. Okay? And if you were to smooth out the earth, all the dirt on the earth, smooth it all out, okay? So that it was just one gigantic smooth ball. The ocean would cover the earth like Europa, okay? To a depth of like a mile or two, okay? There's a hell of a lot of water on the surface of the earth. And all of that water used to be in the crust of the earth. Again, see Walt Brown's hydroplate theory, okay? Because that's the best explanation we have. Because there's still water, and it's still coming up through springs in the deep, okay? Like, we still have vents down below that are releasing water into the oceans today, okay? So Dan's idiotic statement here of, well, did you think it ever, covered the Andes? No, because the Andes weren't there, dude. The Andes didn't get created until after the flood. Okay? And see, this is the exact point that they make when they use this passage in 2 Peter chapter 3. Okay? They will say, where is this coming he promised? Ever since our fathers died, everything goes on as it has since the beginning of creation. That is literally Peter predicting uniformitarianism coming along. The present is the key to the past. Everything that we see today is what happened for billions of years. No, it's not. No, it's not. And the proof is right there in black and white, son. So, I'm sorry if you think you know what happened billions of years ago. You don't. Okay? That's the point. You can't know that layers of dirt are billions of years old. Okay? Because as discussed in the previous part, you can't know that because the problem is that radiologic dating doesn't work. And that's the point. Okay? And most of the time, they don't use radiologic dating to date the layers. They use fossils to date the layers because they have so-called index fossils that they look at and they say, well, see, if there's a Tyrannosaurus, like we talked about before, there's a Tyrannosaurus in this layer, so that one layer is 65 million years old. There's a Triceratops, that one's 130. Here's one that contains this animal, that's 250. That's the point. And it becomes circular reasoning because you ask, how old is this layer? Oh, it's 130 million years old. Well, how do you know that it's 130 million years old? Because it has this fossil in it. Okay, well, how do you know that that fossil is 130 million years old? Because it's in this layer that's 130 million years old. It's circular reasoning to come up with why they think these layers are millions of years old when, as discussed in the previous thing, where was Charles Darwin's master's degree? Where was Charles Lyell's master's degree? Charles Lyell wasn't even a geologist. He wasn't even a scientist. He was a lawyer, for heaven's sake. And Darwin was a Bible college graduate who couldn't get a job because he was lazy. And yet, these are who Dan and the other atheists of today are propping up as these masters of science! Exclamation point trademarked. Because it's absolutely idiotic to think that these guys knew what they were talking about at all, ever. Because geology, the actual science of geology, okay, was literally just people would walk along, see layers, and go, oh, that's proof of the flood. Until Charles Lyell was like, I hate the Bible. I'm a virulent atheist. And guess what? These layers are now not thousands of years old. They're hundreds of thousands of years old. Ha ha ha. Joke's on you. How? Why? Oh, because I said so. That's not a reasoning. But that was what Charles Lyell did. Okay? And the point is that people like Dan are going, hey, this is great. Because it allows them the freedom to do whatever the hell they want, sin as much as they want, and guess what? There's no consequence for it. Because see, because these are layers that are millions and billions of years old, guess what? We don't have to be good. We don't have to do anything. We can do whatever we want. That's literally what this is all about. It has nothing to do with anything else other than they just don't want the Bible to be true. And I'm here to tell you, son, it is true.
The Alps, or the Himalayas for that matter.
Didn't I just say that too? Yes, I did. Yes, I did.
Answer? You don't.
Because they weren't there. I already said that. So's Matt Powell. So's Kent Hovind. So's Ken Ham. So's every other creationist out there, dude. We never said that they were there. That's the point. You absolute freaking moron. Why is this so difficult to grasp? In fact, I mentioned it in one of my previous videos. I've mentioned it numerous times. Geologists now know that you cannot get mountains the size of the Andes or the size of the Himalayas by slow, gradual uplift. It has to happen rapidly. Okay? Because the problem comes in that you would not get the uplift where you expect it. Case in point, look at the west coast of the United States. While there is the Sierra Nevadas and the Basin Range, what's the biggest mountain range in continental North America? The Rocky Mountains. So you're probably thinking, how did those get there so far inland? When there's no known folds and faults that we can see. Well, it's pretty simple. That's a case of slow uplift. Because while the plate slams in, the ripple happens on the backside. And that causes it to fold up back here more than it does over here. That's the point. The Andes were made very rapidly between the two plates slamming into each other and then uplifting. The same thing with the Himalayas. Okay? Now, I haven't studied European geology. So I can't tell you where the Alps and the Pyrenees and all that fit in. Okay? I just haven't studied it. So that's on me. Okay? But the thing is that I have studied the Ring of Fire. Because living on the West Coast, that's kind of important for everyone. Okay? Because we have the most volcanoes, we have the most earthquakes, because we've got the most faults. Okay? It's just what it is. And the earthquake in Christchurch is a good example of that. Okay? And so, yeah, the Andes and the Himalayas were likely created when they slammed into each other and then went whoosh, like this. Okay? So, yeah, they weren't there, son. And that's the point. Good luck trying to refute that, because when you start actually studying geology, you'll start realizing, oh, the geologists know that this couldn't have happened slowly over millions of years. It had to happen rapidly. In fact, there's been speculation that the Indian plate was going about 30 to 40 miles an hour when it slammed into the Asian plate, creating the Himalayas. So, sorry, Dan, you don't have a leg to stand on.
And I think that the most powerful argument of all is the fact that we find 10-mile thick pieces of rock from the Earth's crust that have been subducted rapidly 500 miles down into Earth's hot molten mantle. This rock that we've found that's 10 miles thick, it's still cold even though it's surrounded by 5,000 degree molten rock.
Those subducted plates are still 500 degrees C. They aren't cold per se.
Dude, relative to the rock around it, it's cold, okay? Because it hasn't had enough time to heat up and melt. That's the point, Dan. So yeah, they've heated up to 500 degrees C, okay? But they're not 5,000 degrees, you absolute moron. That's the point. I mean, are you that much of an idiot that you can't even understand the difference between 500 and 5,000? That 5,000 is greater than 500, so ergo it's colder? Do you not understand that cold and hot are just relative to each other? Because if I go in and I boil water in a pot, okay? And then I take like a pack of noodles that are room temperature. The boiling water is 200 degrees, 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius if you want to use your stupid metric crap. It's 100 degrees Celsius. Okay? I dump that shit in there. Okay? I dump in the noodles. What happens to the water? It stops boiling for a few minutes. I haven't changed the heat settings. Nothing like that. Okay? It's because I've taken a gigantic pack of spaghetti noodles that are at room temperature, whatever that room temperature might be. Okay? For me, it's 70 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? And I dump that into the thing. Now, if I took a thermal camera, okay, and pointed it at the boiling pot of water, the water would still be really hot, but the noodles would show up like either a warm yellow or possibly starting to turn a little blue, okay, compared to the water, because the temperature is different. That's what's happened when you have something that's subducted down like this, okay, way down into the deep into the Earth's mantle, okay, and it's not the same temperature as the surrounding rock. In fact, here, let's go back really fast and let's look at this thing for a second. Okay? This says P-wave tomography under Tonga Trench, Pacific Ocean. The blue shows the colder ocean lithosphere descending down into the mantle to a depth of nearly 700 kilometers, 435 miles. The white dots represent earthquake foci. Now, you're probably wondering, what are P waves, what are S waves? P waves are the primary waves, okay? That's generally when they have an earthquake, it sends out primary waves, okay? Those waves we can measure. That's how we know what the Earth is like, okay? And as you can see, this thing down here, okay, is way cooler than the surrounding thing. Because here's why I called Dan ScamManDan. In physics, we don't say this is hot, this is cold. Okay? When you say hot and cold, you're talking about relative temperature, okay? Where something might be extremely hot in one area and something else might be a lot colder, even though it might still be warm compared to, like, say, normal, the normal atmosphere of the Earth, right? Okay, our normal operating temperature for humans is between, 70 and 90 degrees, okay? Our body heat is 98.4, 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit is the typical for our body, okay? That is what your body optimally is at, okay? And having an air temperature of around about 50 or 70 degrees Fahrenheit, okay, keeps that internal temperature regulated, okay? Because if you get too hot, you start to sweat. If you get too cold, you start to freeze, okay? So, yes. But all temperature is it's the measure of the amount of excitement in molecules. That's it. Okay? So when you turn on your heater, because it's wintertime, you turn on your heater, the heater's blasting, you feel that warm air come over you. You're feeling the movement, the excitement of said molecules, okay? And those molecules bounce off your skin, okay? And you feel that as heat. Because those molecules are really excited and it creates friction along your skin. And you feel that as heat. It's the same thing as if you take your hands, okay, slap them together, rub them back and forth like this. Right? Friction, okay? That friction warms up your hands, okay? Because you're exciting the layers of skin between your hands back and forth like this, okay? And the faster you do it, the more your hands warm up, okay? And then if you stick one on top of the other, like this, it feels warm, doesn't it? Okay? That's because you've excited the skin layer, okay? And it brings blood to the surface, okay? Which causes it to heat up. Plus, you've actually heated the air in between the ridges and bumps and everything on your hand, okay? You've excited those air molecules. So when you put that over your hand, okay, it feels warmer, okay? Because you haven't done anything on the backside of your hand. So the backside of your hand is still at whatever the ambient temperature is and whatever your body temperature is, okay? And because your skin layer is contacting the air, so it's whatever that temperature is right there on the back of your hand. So when you put your hand on top, the excited molecules of your hand, on the back side of your hand where the molecules aren't as excited, you're feeling that warmth. Okay? And your body is transferring that warmth into the back of your hand. So for Dan to stand there and say, well, it's still 500 degrees. But it's not 5,000. That's the point. Okay? That crust, okay, that subducted crust that came in here was subducted so fast that it hasn't had time to melt yet, because it is not as hot as the surrounding magma. The surrounding lithosphere is 5,000 degrees. The rock has heated up to 500 degrees, but it's not at 5,000, so it hasn't melted yet. And it is still being pushed down, which is why you're seeing all of these earthquakes down here, really down deep inside the mantle, is because it's still being pushed down. Because it's subducting underneath like this, and it's still pushing down at the bottom. Okay? Because behind it, it's being traffic jammed in. That's the point, Dan. It happened so rapidly that it hasn't had time. If this was billions of years, it would have already melted by now. Okay? In fact, it would probably have melted back up to almost ground level. Okay? Or where it's being subducted level. That's what I mean by ground level. Okay? It would have probably, if it had been billions of years, it probably would be right around in here, would still be, kind of, because that would be the new stuff being subducted. All of this down here would be gone. So for Dan to sit there and say, like it's some kind of a major own, oh, it's 500 degrees C. So? It's not 5,000, and last time I checked, 5,000 is greater than 500. Got it yet? I need you to understand this, Dan, because you're not a geologist. You're not even a scientist. You don't even understand what the implications of that particular subduction zone means. It means that rapid geology is a thing, and that the Earth isn't billions of years old. Okay? And that when this plate hit and started to subduct like this, okay, it went so fast, it was moving so fast that it projected down into the mantle so far that it hasn't melted yet. That's the point. Now we're going to hear this part again.
It's still cold even though it's surrounded by 5,000 degree molten rock.
Those subducted plates are still 500 degrees C.
Like I said, like that's supposed to be some kind of an own. 5,000 is more than 500. Again, Dan. Which means that you don't even understand that that Matt Powell is talking about the thing subducted so fast it hasn't had time to heat up yet to 5,000 degrees to melt, or maybe 1,000 or 2,000 degrees to melt. Okay, because it displaced so much around it, and who knows how long that plate of rock is and how wide it is, because judging by that graph, it's pretty damn thick, which means it's going to take a while for it to actually heat up to the point where it's going to melt. Okay? Because just like if you were to take a paperclip, let's say, okay, you stuck a paperclip and then you took a blowtorch, okay, just a regular blowtorch. You go, how long is it going to take you to melt that? Not very long, right? Okay? But if you had a pretty thick ingot, right? Maybe it's a few centimeters thick. Maybe it's about, 10 or 20 centimeters wide, and it's about, 30 long, okay? And you heat it up with that blowtorch, it's going to take a lot longer, right? Okay? Because there's more molecules that need to be heated up. Now, the outside layer will start to melt long before the inside of the thing melts, or the bottom of it melts. Okay? But that's the point. You have a lot more molecules, it's a lot denser, and it transfers heat a lot better along it. Okay? Which is why it's only 500 degrees, being that if that happened at around the time of the flood, which was 4400 BC, and we're now at 2080, okay? Think about it. It's only been down there for around about about 5,000 years or so. Okay, about 5,500 years. And that's the point, Dan, is that there hasn't been enough time. Okay? It's been sitting down there for so long, and it displaced things so fast that it just hasn't had time to properly heat up and melt, because it's probably so big and it was so thick that the outer layers have been eroding away slowly as the heat has reached it. But it's so big, it's so thick, that it hasn't had time to completely melt fully away. Which is the whole point, Dan. If it's billions of years old at that point, it wouldn't be that far underground. It would only be maybe at most 100 kilometers. At most. So by standing there and saying, well, this is this, you don't know, son. You have no clue what is going on, because your mind is so stuck on the uniformitarianism crap that when you see something like that, your first instinct is to say, well, it's still 500 degrees C. Last time I checked, 500 is greater than 5,000, and it doesn't matter at that point if you're using Fahrenheit and Celsius, because 5,000 degrees Fahrenheit is still way hotter than 500 degrees C. Okay? So, no, son. That's not what it is.
They aren't cold per se. But what would be the reason for them being cooler? Perhaps the fact that they were oceanic plates? Could it be that?
No. No. Because they know the Juan de Fuca plate, which is subducting under the state of Washington right now, okay? It's what fuels Mount St. Helens, Mount Rainier, all the other mountains that are there, okay? They know that that plate doesn't go down to a depth of this. Okay? They know that because they've measured the plate numerous times. In fact, when they had back in 2001, when they had 2001, when they had the earthquake in Seattle, which was actually kind of down towards the south end, more towards the south end of Puget Sound down by Tacoma. But still, the point being, it was over there, okay? It was underneath Puget Sound is where the actual epicenter was, and it was way down deep inside the earth. Because that's where the Juan de Fuca plate was subducting under the North American plate like this. And they know because there's a rock that is blocking the plate like this. Okay? And that's what caused, because this is where the earthquake was. Okay? Right where that rock formation is. Okay? That's how they knew. Because I learned about that when I was in Geology 101, son. Okay? And they said that the plate, the Juan de Fuca plate, is only down a max of about 100 kilometers. Even though it's an oceanic plate, it doesn't go down that far. Because what happens is that typically speaking, when it's a slow-moving plate, like the Juan de Fuca plate, it melts and then it comes up into the volcanoes. Okay? Because the plate goes down far enough where it melts, and then it comes up underneath the volcanoes in the Cascade Mountains. So look at where the Juan de Fuca plate is, where the boundary of the Juan de Fuca plate is, and then measure on a map exactly how far it is to there, and that's how far down it is. Okay, because it's going like this. And that's where it's melting, son. Now, yes, you have magma that is coming up into these volcanoes here, okay? But that's magma that's being churned up from the fact that the plate subducted so fast, okay, that it displaced a whole host of the magma up to the surface, okay, which caused those volcanoes to erupt, okay, because it pushed that magma towards the surface. So it thinned the crust a little bit, okay? That's the point. That's what the study of geology is all about, son. So no, they know that slow-moving plates like the Juan de Fuca plate, okay, don't go 700 kilometers below the surface. They only go a maximum of 1 to 200 kilometers. And that's the maximum, okay? Now, this plate has since slowed down and it is now melting away. But like I said, it moved so quickly, okay? So, no, being an oceanic crust plate doesn't mean that it's going to subduct that far that fast, okay, over billions of years. Because the plate would be creating the exact same earthquakes at the level that we would see it, like here on the Juan de Fuca plate, which is between 1 to 200, okay? That's where we would be seeing most of the earthquakes, not at 6 to 700, okay? That's the point, Dan. And that's what you don't understand, and that's why you're ScamManDan, is because you don't even understand the basics of geology. Okay? This is 101 level stuff, son. This is not like master's degree level, okay, geology. If you've had a basic Geology 101 course in a college, you should be able to grasp this. Okay? And when I went through, we didn't have this kind of stuff. Okay? Because testing the P waves and doing all of that kind of stuff was still relatively new. I mean, that was 20 years after Mount St. Helens, literally. Okay? And they found that using seismographs at that time, they were starting to figure out that using seismographs, they could actually start mapping the interior of the Earth. And over the last 23 years, okay, they've slowly over time started to map the interior of the Earth, and they finally figured out that there are a hell of a lot of things like this. Okay, this is not, I mean, this is something that they would not have known 40 years ago. Okay? After Mount St. Helens. They didn't know that this plate was that big. This, again, like other things, like Mount St. Helens, like other eruptions, like other earthquakes, have shot holes in the theory of uniformitarianism being the key. Okay? Because no geologist who's worth their salt is going to say that this plate is billions of years old at this point, or even millions of years old, because we know, because of what we've observed from the Juan de Fuca plate, we know that this plate can't be that old. It just can't, because it's too cold relative to the surrounding rock. That's the point of saying hot versus cold. It's not, oh, the plate is absolutely frigid temperature, okay? And so when it's subducted, it's just, it's taken billions of years to heat it up to 500 degrees C. No. No. It doesn't work like that, son. Okay? Because if this thing had been subducting, it would have had to have been well below zero. Okay? Probably approaching absolute zero for it to be like that over billions of years. Okay? I mean, and we know that, like, space is, I want to say, negative 200 or 250 degrees Fahrenheit. Okay? And we know that down at the bottom of the ocean, because, I mean, we've measured temperature down there at times. We know that it's cold, but it's not. We know that it's not freezing because it can't, the ocean currents and everything still move. But it's cold, okay? I mean, heck, most of the time the surface of the ocean is around about between 38 and about 45 degrees Fahrenheit, okay? And down at the bottom of the ocean, like way down below, like say where the Titanic is at on the bottom of the Atlantic, it's cold, okay? It's in the 30s, but Fahrenheit. But it's close to freezing, but it's not freezing because the water, the water still moves, and because it has that motion, the water hasn't changed state yet. Okay, so that's the point that I'm trying to make. So that doesn't explain why that thing is so big and long, okay? And like I said, we're looking at a cross-section like this. Who knows in 3 dimensions how wide it is this way, okay? Because we don't know how long that plate is. We're looking at one place between Tonga and Fiji, okay, on the surface of the Earth going this way, okay? And so the plate's coming down like this, okay, from Tonga all the way to Fiji, okay, because Fiji's over here and Tonga's up here, and this is where the plate is subducting, okay? And who knows how wide it is this way, okay? That's my point. The wider it is this way, the more it's going to distribute the heat across it, okay?
Now, could cold rock be sitting down in 5,000 degree temperatures for millions of years?
It's not cold rock.
There's
I just want to slap him. I'm sorry. I just want to slap some sense into him. Comparatively speaking, Dan, it's cold. Okay? You absolute moron. And this is why I call him ScamManDan. Is because, again, he has no concept of physics. Okay? Physics. Cold doesn't mean freezing, you absolute moron. Okay? I could stick my hand in this glass of water that I have, and it would feel cold compared to my hand. Okay? That doesn't mean that this is freezing water, Dan. It could be 50 degrees. But compared to what my hand is, okay, my hand is a lot warmer than the water. And again, if I were to take a noodle, okay, let's just do this, a lasagna noodle. Okay? Let me do this. A lasagna noodle, okay? Take a lasagna noodle, okay? Get yourself a small pot of water. Actually, or you can get yourself a big one, okay? Heat it up to boiling so that it's a rolling boil, okay? It's at 212 degrees Fahrenheit, 100 degrees Celsius, okay? It's boiling, rapidly boiling water, okay? Take that noodle, okay? And when you feel that noodle, okay, if you stick your hand up over the pot, you'll feel the steam, and the steam's hot, right? Don't stick your hand in the boiling water; you'll scald yourself. Okay, I'm not going to be responsible for some idiot sticking their hand in water. Okay, I'm not saying that. But if you stick your hand over the steam, right? The steam is hot. Okay, take that noodle and stick it down into the water. Okay, just from the end. Okay. Stick it down into the cool water, or stick it down in the boiling water, count to 10, and then pull it out. Now, briefly touch the noodle. Okay? It won't have had time to melt. It won't have had time to get soft and soggy. Okay? But it is now warmer than the noodle above it. That's the point. It's not boiling, but it is now warmer than the other rock. Okay? Than the other part of the noodle, which hasn't been submerged in water. And if you stick it back into the boiling water and leave it there, okay, then what'll happen is that it will eventually, as the noodle heats up, it gets soft, and then what happens? The other parts of the noodle will start to slip down into the water, okay, where they will become soft, because it'll slip down until it hits the solid, till it hits the bottom, where the noodle is still solid, because that portion of it is just entered the water. And that's the fucking point. What enters the boiling water does not instantly turn into boiling fucking shit. And I am sick and tired of people like ScamManDan who don't understand physics at all. Oh, it's not cold. It's not hot either. Because it's not no 5,000 degrees. And it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that it would not take, that in billions of years, that slab would have completely melted away. It would have become like the surrounding rock. And there is no fucking way that it can be that deep after billions of years. You can't fucking do it.
No way. That's not physically possible.
So there you go. Okay? That's under the East Coast. Okay? So like I said, out here on the West Coast, this is the Juan de Fuca plate right here. Okay? This is the one that's subducting underneath basically what is Washington State and a little bit of Oregon. Okay? And right about there, okay, a little bit south of that, okay, is the south end of Puget Sound, and that's where that rock is sitting down like this, and it is holding the Juan de Fuca plate in place, okay, and every once in a while, the plate moves around that rock a tiny bit, okay, and when it does, they get an earthquake. Because it's like a 9 down there, and it comes up and it's like a 6.8, I think, was the magnitude of that earthquake at that time. Okay? But this graphic right here shows that there is millions of tons of cooler rock than the surrounding mantle. That's the point, Dan. It's cooler than the surrounding mantle. It may be 500 degrees centigrade, but it is not no 5,000. That's the point. So unless Dan doesn't understand temperature and how it works, okay? Because here's the thing about being an instrumentation technician like me, okay? You understand that you don't just flip on your heater or your air conditioner and then everything just magically cools down in 3 seconds. Temperature takes time, okay? You don't set a pot, a big, 3 or 4 quart pot of water on your stove, flip the dial to high, and then bam, it instantly heats up to 212 degrees right then and there. Bam, within a second. Temperature takes time. You absolute freaking moron. And I'm going to continue to call this guy ScamManDan because he doesn't even understand the basics of temperature. Just temperature, folks. Okay? And if he can't even understand the physics of temperature, he has no business trying to tell anyone what is hot or cold. Because, yeah, this slab of rock might be 500 degrees centigrade. I don't know. But it's not no 5,000, because if it was 5,000, it would not be a solid slab of rock. That's the point, Dan. And I guarantee you, he's probably going to come back and go, well, those are probably 500 degrees Celsius too.
The only way you get cold rock that's 10 miles thick from the crust into the mantle of the Earth is from catastrophic breaking up of the plates and plates going under one another and literally getting subducted down.
Yep.
And if they're still cold, then it means that they have not been there that long.
Yeah.
Again, not cold.
Dude! Shut up, Dan! Just saying not cold doesn't mean that it's 5,000 degrees! It may be hot to you, but it's not hot to the mantle. I mean, this is just the height of stupidity, folks. If you're sitting here and you're watching SciManDan, okay, and you have any lick of scientific understanding about what I've said, about the physics of temperature, okay, and that while, yes, 500 degrees, 500 degrees C is pretty hot to us, right? Because it's, 400 degrees past boiling water, right? But it's not 5,000 degrees. And so that means that if you were to stick something, like I said, like a noodle into boiling water, take a lasagna noodle, stick it into a big pot of boiling water, I guarantee you that the noodle doesn't become soft like that. It takes time, okay? And when you stick that noodle in, it takes time for that boiling water, okay, to actually, because here's another part of it. When you displace something like that, it actually cools the surrounding rock down, okay? That's why when you, take, let's say you take some, egg noodles, right? You have a pot of boiling water, and you just dump in a whole bunch of egg noodles, that the boiling stops for a second. Because you have just taken a whole bunch of cooler objects than the surrounding water, and you've thrown it in there, and it has actually cooled the water temperature down below the boiling point. Now, it won't take very long for the water to boil again. Why? Because, A, you have heat being generated from below, okay? But you also have the water is still has a lot, it retains a lot of its thermal properties, okay? And so the molecules are still moving very rapidly, so it doesn't take very long for that to heat back up and then continue to boil. Okay? So the whole point is that when you displace that much rock that quickly, okay, it's going to, that rock coming in, okay, is going to displace, and it's going to cool down the surrounding rock. So while the surrounding rock may not be, I mean, it's probably not, it's not going to cool it down by, magnitudes of 1,000, but it's going to cool it down some, okay? And so then it's going to take a while for that rock to heat back up from the surrounding rock, which is why we have all of those volcanoes right there, all of those atolls, like you see in Fiji and Bora Bora and all those, okay, Tonga and all those. That's why they're there, okay, is because when that plate subducted very quickly, it pushed a lot of that magma up into the crust, and the crust thinned down, and then that magma pushed up out of the floor of the ocean, and then created the islands that we see there today. Similar to how Hawaii is the hot spot, right? Or the hot spot's here, and then the big island of Hawaii is over it, and then Kilauea is here, and then the new one's down below it right here. Okay? That's the point. But Dan is such an idiot that he doesn't even understand that when we talk about hot and cold, or heat and cool, okay, we're not talking about, oh, that rock is freezing. No, we're saying that rock is much, much cooler than the surrounding rock. And if Dan can't even understand something as simple as that, he has no business trying to debunk anything scientific, because it shows his ignorance in actual science.
This catastrophic event of the plates moving extremely fast, continental sprint, did in fact happen, and they were rapidly subducted, these 10-mile thick pieces of rock. And if that happened today, that would cause a global flood. Imagine, just for a minute, if you had a 10-mile thick piece of rock that was broken up from the crust, that subducted. That's how we even get earthquakes, is by rocks and stuff sliding around and the crust of the earth sliding into different positions. That would have created another global flood if something like that happened today.
How can you be so clueless about geological processes and speak with such confidence?
I would ask the same thing of you, Dan. Because honestly, this guy is the most ignorant person on the face of the earth when it comes to geology and the physics of heat. Because he hasn't proven anything in this video. He hasn't. I have given you more scientific evidence in my 3 videos than he has in 9 minutes and 12 seconds. In fact, you got more from Matt Powell than you did from Dan. That's saying something. So Dan, I'll pose the question to you. How can you be so clueless about geology, physics, chemistry, biology, and speak with such confidence?
Beats me. Well, I think we'll leave Matt there.
And I think we'll leave Dan there because we are just over an hour, and I wanted to make sure that we got done with this video because, honestly, this really boils my blood. It's one thing if you want to sit there and say, hey, we know evolution's a thing. We know that this works. We know this. We know that. Sure, you have a theory on that. But, son, if you're listening to Dan and you're thinking, wow, this guy knows a lot, he don't know jack. Okay? He don't know jack squat about anything. Okay? Because I gave you more. In fact, just in this video, in this hour-long video, I have given you more science than Dan's probably given in the history of his entire channel. Okay? Just because I understand different things about science more than Dan ever could. And look, I'm not saying that Dan can't debunk certain flat earthers and talk about certain experiments that are going on and doing stuff like that. But if you're going to come after people who have studied geology, who have studied physics, who understand rock subducting, cool slabs, you'd think that he would do a tiny bit of research. And this is the difference between Dan and Creaky. At least Creaky tries to do some kind of research to make himself a little bit more knowledgeable about a subject before he tries to tackle them. Okay? It doesn't always work, but at least he doesn't make himself into as big of a fool as Dan does. Because honestly, this is my, fourth or fifth debunk of Dan so far, and I have owned him on every single subject. I shouldn't do that, honestly. I shouldn't be able to do that if he's SciManDan, okay? Because he should have the scientific knowledge to be able to back up what he's trying to claim. But he's not. He's literally standing there, and his biggest comeback is, oh, the rocks are 500 degrees C, so, yeah, they're not cold. But they're not 5,000, Dan. That's the point. And if you can't even understand a simple concept as 5,000 is greater than 500, you're an idiot, okay? And you have no business. You're such an ignoramus that you have no business whatsoever trying to debunk anybody. So smash that like button, hit subscribe, drop a comment below, let me know what you thought of this video series, and as we say, we will see you on the next one.